Last week we started a new series, looking in Genesis at the man named Joseph, and really starting the series that we are called to live in God's plan. God has a calling, God has a plan for each and every one of our lives. And it's special for each and every one of our lives. And we are to follow His plan and follow His will as we go through this life. And we realize that, life is so much better when we follow His plan. On Joseph's life to Joseph within a dream, and we realize that even though he had this dream, even though he had this plan on his life, that there's certain things that did not disqualify Joseph that normally the world or we or even ourselves would disqualify him. His age didn't disqualify Joseph. Our age doesn't disqualify us from following God's plan. Our family background and all the drama in the past doesn't disqualify us from living in God's plan. Our past mistakes don't disqualify us from living in God's plan. So this morning I want to continue looking at Joseph, and this morning really what I want to look at is something that I call the illusion of the pit. The illusion of the pit in our life. And I want to start off explaining this just quickly, and I've explained it before, but anytime I get to explain an illusion, hold on a second. I'm caught on a cord. I brought with me my box. An illusion is something that we think, it's let me see what I got here. Okay. An illusion is something that tricks us or makes us think that we're seeing something. And hopefully we're looking at something and we think we're seeing something, but something else is really happening. I like to call it with kids, I like to call it surprises for the eyes. And really there's certain things to every illusion. First is the setup, right? Or the story. And sometimes it can be simple. It can be telling a big long story, or sometimes it could just be something like pulling out something normal and ripping it up. And then there's the part where you make people think, oh, I've seen this before. I know what's happening. Like, when someone sticks something in their hand, there's something that always happens, right? What happens? It disappears. You're right. It disappears. So that is what an illusion is usually what you make people think they see something that happens, and it doesn't. And then at the end of the illusion, there's this grand reveal. There's always like, wow, right? So instead of it disappearing, we just make it come back together. That is what an illusion is. I want to do one more, just to show what an illusion is, just for fun. I need one of my teenagers or one of my kids to come up and help me. Come on, Abby. You are the closest one. You have an all-important job this morning, okay? I need you to sit here in this chair. All right? Sit up straight. Okay? Now, an illusion, like I said, it really just tricks your eyes. You think you're seeing something, and hopefully it tricks you. You think you're seeing something, but it's really not happening. So what I need you to do is I need you to do this. Good job. Okay. I've got a very important job for you. Hold it up like that. Okay, you are going to hold my toilet paper. Here we go. Ew, isn't that gross? See what you can do with it a little bit lower so everyone can see your face. There you go. All right. An illusion, a lot of times, right, what I can do is there's different types of illusions. One of them is you can make things disappear. Some of them you can make things change. Other ones you can act like you read someone's mind. Really, you're not doing any of that, right? So I can grab this right here and make it disappear, right? But we all know that it didn't disappear, right? A little bit higher, okay? Okay. So we all know it didn't disappear, so where did it go? You're right, it's in the other hand. That's how an illusion works, right? You see it, and you think you see it, and your mind tries to figure it out, what's happening, but it still tricks your mind. You want to try it again? Because you're a little confused, aren't you, right now? Okay. Wrap the paper. Okay. So this time, right, you grab it, okay? And this time you think it's in this hand, right? But it's not. What hand is it in? You are correct. It is in this hand. You need to go a little bit higher on this one. Down. Okay. Actually, here. I know our problem. It doesn't go under. It's always over, right? We just put it on wrong. Okay, so let's get this again. All right, here we go. This time, what I'm going to do is I'm going to eat it. Would you like a bite? Are you sure? Okay. I'm going to put my mouth. Okay, you ready? You're not convinced, are you? Do you have any? Here, hold on. Hold that up just a little bit higher. Okay, one last time. Okay, are you ready? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this and I'm going to make it disappear right in front of your eyes, a little bit lower. There we go. Okay, ready? So we're going to go like this. I'm going to go 1, 2, and it's just going to disappear. You're not convinced, are you? Okay, ready? 1, 2, 3. Okay, first of all, do you have any idea what was happening? No. Did it look like the toilet paper disappeared to you? That's the best illusion you've ever seen, isn't it? Like, I am the greatest illusionist ever, right? Okay, ask them. Was that the most amazing illusion you've ever seen? They're not convinced that that was great. Do you want to know why? Here, give me this. Look behind you. Give her a hand. That's all an illusion is. Like, it really looked like it was disappearing, didn't it, Abby? Like, to her, in her seat, where she was sitting, this toilet paper was just gone. I mean, it just kept disappearing like that. She was like, oh, it's over here, now it's over there. It's gone. And where you're sitting, you're looking there going, this is the most ridiculous thing I've ever seen. Like, how could someone be falling for this? That is what an illusion is. Satan is a master at illusions in our lives. We have this enemy in our lives that does not want us to live in God's plan. He does not want us to follow God. And so what he wants to do is he wants to create these illusions in our lives. He wants to lie to us. He wants to trick us into thinking that one thing is happening when really something else is. He wants to trick us into thinking that God's plan isn't working, but really it is. And he does this all the time in little ways, in big ways. Sometimes it's in our job or our family or a sickness. And he creates this illusion like, you know what? This just isn't working out. He does this with Joseph. That's where we're going to pick up this morning. Satan uses a pit. Satan uses a pit to stop Joseph from living in God's plan, to derail everything, to put an illusion, and to trick Joseph into giving up. Genesis chapter 37 is where we're going to start. Verse 12. Genesis chapter 37, verse 12. And this picks up right after we ended last week. Right? Joseph tells his brothers his dreams. They're all mad at him. Joseph tells his father and his brothers in dreams. They're all mad at him. His father yells at him and says, come on, Joseph, use your head. What are you doing? And so now that's where we pick up. It says, now his brothers, this is Joseph's brothers, had gone to graze their father's flock near Shechem. And Israel said to Joseph, as you know, your brothers are grazing the flocks near Shechem. Come, I'm going to send you to them. Very well, he replied. So he said to him, go, and see if all is well with your brothers and with the flocks, and bring back word to me. Then he sent him off from the valley of Hebron. So Joseph is sent to check on his brothers. His brothers, now as we have found out, his brothers were not trustworthy people. They weren't the top of the line of people. In fact, they were known for getting into trouble. That's kind of what started their hatred towards Joseph, because if you look back up in verse 2, It says that Joseph kept bringing bad reports to his dad about his brothers. Joseph was, the person that would be like, hey, Dad, did you hear what they did again? Hey, Dad, they're doing this, they're doing that. He was the snitch of the family, I guess. So they're known for getting into trouble, and they're in this area called Shechem. The last time we've heard of Shechem was a couple chapters back when Simeon and Levi, two of the brothers, caused a really big problem in that area. In fact, they had murdered an entire village of people to get revenge for something that one of them did to their sister. So there's already this tension in the area. There's already this personal conflict, and the dad is like, okay, I know they're grazing their flocks near that area because that's where the grass is. That's where the sheep can get the water. So it's like, Joseph, will you do me a favor? Go travel, it's about 80 miles, so several days away. Go travel 80 miles away and just check on them. Just make sure they're not killing another village or, doing something bad. Just check on them and come back and bring me the report because, Joseph, I know I can trust you, and if they're doing something bad, you'll tell on them. On a side note, as I was reading this, I thought, boy, apparently Jacob is still in denial about how bad the brothers hated Joseph. Apparently, Jacob is so in love with his son Joseph and has him favored so high that he thinks nothing bad could ever happen, that he doesn't realize, as Scripture said earlier, that the brothers, were jealous, couldn't say anything nice about him. In fact, it says they hated him. But he sends them off anyway. It says, when Joseph arrived at Shechem, a man found him wandering around the fields and asked him, well, what are you looking for? He replied, I'm looking for my brothers. Can you tell me where they are grazing their flocks? Oh, they've moved on from here, the man answered. I heard them say, let's go to Dothan. So Joseph went after his brothers and found them near Dothan. Joseph's wandering around. He knows that these are the fields that his brothers should have been in. He's trying to find them, and some guy sees him and says, hey, what's going on? He can't find them. He says, well, you know what? They're about 20 miles away. Another day's travel, and you'll find them. Here's what I find amazing, that Joseph, he does his job. He goes to the area that he's supposed to, and instead of giving up and just going home, he decides he's going to finish the job. He's going to do it right. He's going to do the right thing. Even though it's going to travel more, even though it's going to take longer than it's supposed to, he is going to do the right thing. As we know, doing that right thing actually ends up leading him into a little bit of trouble. Sometimes doing the right thing leads to hard times or leads to trouble because of other people's sinful hearts. I know that's hard to hear. I know it's hard to believe too, because sometimes we have this idea that as long as I'm doing the right thing, there will never be any hard times in front of me. Or as long as I'm doing what God wants, life will be easy, the road will be flat. There will be no valleys. But Joseph here, he's doing the right thing, and sometimes doing the right thing leads to what looks like a harder time. And it's usually because of other people's sins and the wrongdoings of someone else. So he finds them near Dothan, but they saw him in the distance, and before he reached them, they plotted to kill him. Here comes that dreamer, they said to each other. Come now, let's kill him and throw him into one of the cisterns and say that a ferocious animal devoured him. And then we'll see what comes of his dreams. Well, when Reuben heard this, he tried to rescue him from their hands. Let's not take his life, he said. Don't shed any blood. We don't want to be murderers, even though they already were. Throw him into the cistern here in the desert, but don't lay a hand on him. Reuben said this to rescue him from them and take him back to his father. So when Joseph came to his brothers, they stripped him of his robe, the richly ornamented robe he was wearing, and they took him and threw him into the cistern. Now the cistern was empty, and there was no water in it. How much would you have to hate someone to do that? How much would you have to let bitterness and hatred and jealousy work on your heart and harden your heart to see someone far away and say, you know what, I hate them so much, I just want them dead. And then to take it a step further and say, you know what, there's no one around. No one would ever know. When we were younger, I used to get mad at my friends. I think everyone did this. My cousins were my best friends, and I also had a couple, we would all hang out, and sometimes we would just disagree over something. Like who would play Mario or who would play Luigi on Mario, right? I mean, that was like the big disagreement. We'd start yelling at each other. We'd get mad, and it always came there, not always, but there's sometimes we'd get so mad at each other, we would say, I hate you, right? And even though we would say, I hate you, and if it was my cousin, the biggest upset, the biggest thing you could say was, you're not my cousin anymore. I don't know how many times my cousin wasn't my cousin anymore. But no matter how far it got, no matter how heated it got, there was even one time I remember grabbing the controller to the Nintendo and throwing it at my best friend and hitting him with it. And I broke the controller. I felt horrible. That's like the worst thing you could ever do is break a Nintendo controller on your best friend. But even if it got that bad, an hour later we were always like, hey, best friends again. It's okay, I forgive you, hug it out, let's go play. It never got to this point. But I think if we're not careful, and we let that bitterness into our heart, it's really easy to start small and then grow. And we allow that bitterness to fester inside of us and begin to harden our hearts. And that bitterness turns into hate and anger. And I don't think it takes long. I don't think it's that far of a leap to go from bitterness and anger to this hate where we see someone walking far away and say, I can't stand that person. I wish they would just... We may not be out in the middle of a field with an empty cistern where we could throw them in it. But if we're not careful, that hatred, same hatred that brothers had, will enter our hearts. Reuben, the brother that must have had some sense in his head, was like, hey, let's not kill him. Let's just throw him in this pit. Let's let nature take its course. And Reuben was going to, after they leave, was going to sneak back and try to save him. So that's what they do. They throw him in the pit. They strip his robe, which I think is ironic. He's still wearing his little princess robe and showing it off to everyone as he travels. And they took him and threw him into the cistern. Now the cistern was empty and there was no water in it. As they sat down to eat their meal. I want to pause right there. The Hebrews, if you go into Hebrews, the book of Hebrews, it actually gives us an extra detail. It says this, as he was crying out, as he was begging for help, as their younger brother was in this pit just crying, please don't let me die. Please, I'll do anything. Get me out of here. I don't want to die. They sat down and had a picnic. And they just listened. And I don't know if they had smiles on their faces. I don't know if they were joking. I don't know if they threw things down the pit and just to make him more mad. But he's crying out, help me. Please don't let me die. In a pit. And he can't get out. There's nothing he could do. Imagine being Joseph right there. Your entire world gone in a moment. One moment, life is great. You know, right? Your dad loves you. You have everything you ever wanted. God's plan is working out. In fact, as you're looking around and you're looking at all the dumb things your brother's doing, you're like, you know what? My plan, or God's plan, is going to work out a lot sooner than later. Because sooner or later, I'm going to be ruling all of them. And then all of a sudden, the pit. His robe's gone, his father's gone, his hope is gone, his life is gone, his brothers win. God's plan loses. You think the questions that would be going through his mind while he's in this pit, while he's yelling, just please help me? I mean, he's probably looking around going, where did I mess up? How did this happen? God, how can you let this happen to me? Or where's God now? Or boy, you know what? I should have went with plan B. Or maybe even, why did I even listen? Or was it God that I was listening to? All these questions. I bet the first question that he thought was, why didn't I just turn around when I couldn't find him? One day ago, I had the opportunity just to turn around and go home and forget about my brothers, but now everything is lost. This is the illusion of the pit. That moment is this lie that Satan wants to tell us. The lie when we're following God's plan and then something seems to go wrong. The lie where we're following God and something seems to throw us off the path that we thought God was taking us on. And someone or something ruins the plan that we thought God had for our life. Maybe a sickness happens, or a bunch of sicknesses, or the loss of a job, or a move, or in school a bully, or a financial hardship. Or just this stress in life and everything seems to be going wrong, or maybe it's our kids, or maybe it's not being able to have kids, or maybe it's a loved one that we thought would never turn on us has turned on us and stabbed us in the back. Or maybe all of a sudden we're caretaking full time with one of our parents. There are so many pits that Satan will throw at us. There's so many pits that Satan will throw us in. And when we look around and we're inside this pit and we look around, we just know it seems like this can't be part of God's plan. And it's so easy to fall into the illusion of God has lost. Or, man, I was foolish in living that in God's plan. Or why didn't I just stick with my own plan? Right? We think we see one thing happening. We think it's disappearing. As they sat down to eat their meal, they looked up and saw a caravan of Ishmaelites coming from Gilead. Their camels were loaded with spice, balm, and myrrh, and they were on their way to take them down to Egypt. Judah said to his brothers, "What will we gain if we kill our brother and cover up his blood? Come, let's sell him to the Ishmaelites and not lay our hands on him. After all, he is our brother. He's our own flesh and blood." His brothers agreed. So when the Midianites merchants came by, his brothers pulled Joseph out of the cistern and sold him for 20 shekels of silver. 20 shekels is very, very low. The normal price for a slave at that time was about 30 shekels of silver. 20 shekels was a deal for them. It had been about like each brother gets $10. So it wasn't for the money. 20 shekels of silver to the Ishmaelites, who took him to Egypt. When Reuben returned to the cistern and saw that Joseph was not there, he tore his clothes and he went back to his brothers and said, "The boy isn't there. Where can I turn now?" They sell him to the slave traders. They send him to Egypt to just take care of their situation once and for all. It was like a win-win situation for them. They're like, you know what? Now we don't have to wait around until he dies in the pit. Because it's not like they could have left the pit and then risked someone hearing him scream. So now they don't have to wait around. They can just leave. They get a couple extra dollars for it. And you know what? They didn't kill their brother. Their hands are now clean. Then they got Joseph's robe because they have to finish the job. They have to finish the lie. They have to finish the illusion. They got Joseph's robe, slaughtered a goat, dipped the robe in the blood. They took the ornamented robe back to their father. And notice what they say. It's not, "Oh, Joseph is dead." They just say, "Hey, Dad, we found this. Examine it and see if it's your son's robe." "Hey, Dad, does this look familiar, Dad?" He recognized it. said, "It is my son's robe. Some ferocious animal has devoured him. Joseph has surely been torn to pieces." Then Jacob tore his clothes, put on sackcloth, mourned for his son many days. All his sons and daughters came to comfort him, but he refused to be comforted. "No," he said, "in mourning I will go down to the grave to my son." So his father wept for him. They dip the robe in blood. They give it to dad. The dad says, "Joseph is dead." Look how underhanded they were. I mean, how could they have justified their actions? Well, you know what? They said, "Oh, we didn't kill Joseph. We also didn't even lie to our dad. All we did was just give him a robe dipped in blood." And I'm sure as they looked at what had just happened, they knew they had won. They knew they would never see Joseph again. They knew those crazy dreams that Joseph had were dead. They were gone. God's plans were ruined, and they were pleased. Joseph, in the pit, sold into slavery, taken to a place that he didn't even speak their language, would die a slave, owned like a piece of cattle, from the top of the mountain to the lowest of lows in an instant. And if we stop right there, it looks like Satan wins, doesn't it? If we stop right there in the middle of this pit, if we stop right there in the middle of all this, it looks like all hope is gone, all hope is lost. Life is done for Joseph. No hope. This morning, that's where some of us are right now. I believe that's where some of us are right now, is right in the middle of that lie. I believe there are some of us right now that are right in the middle of this illusion where we're looking around and there is just, if we look and we look at the illusion, we look at the pit, we look at the situation, we say, "I was following God's plan, but right now it looks like I'm in a pit and all hope is gone." And then we find verse 36. And really just the first word. If you're an underliner, underline this. Or a highlighter. It says, "Meanwhile." Meanwhile, the Midianites sold Joseph into Egypt, one of Pharaoh's officials, the captain of the guard. But meanwhile, in the meantime. So while Joseph's brothers were back thinking they won, while this was all happening, guess what? Meanwhile, God was still working. Listen, meanwhile, God is working. In the meantime, God is still in control. While you are in the pit, while we are in the pit, God is not done yet. Meanwhile, God still has a plan. God wasn't surprised when Joseph was thrown into the pit. It's not like he was up in heaven wringing his hands going, "Oh no, he's going to be sold into slavery. What do I do now? All is lost." All hope was not lost, even in the pit. It's just an illusion. It was just an illusion. So you may think that you see Satan ruining God's plan in your life, but you may think that God's plan is sinking, but it's not. It's just an illusion. We think we see one thing happening, but really something else is happening because meanwhile, God is still working. We're going to have our worship team come forward. God's plan isn't ruined. God's plan is not ruined because meanwhile, God is still at work. He is still working in us. He is still working on His plan. Joseph still needed to learn. Joseph still needed to grow. He still needed to experience different things before his dream could take place. And God knew this. It may have looked like God lost, but He uses the sins of his brothers and the cruelty of his brothers to work for the good and to continue His plan. The pit was just an illusion. And when we follow God's plan, when we're living for Him, and Satan throws us in a pit and we see all is lost, remember, It's just an illusion. We can trust God that meanwhile, He is still working and He's not done yet. Let's stand and let's worship Him.